Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and today we are celebrating the fact it's Wednesday. Not because we're halfway through a week, it's celebrating the fact that every Wednesday on our Facebook, Twitter and Instagram we dedicate it and call it Worcester Wednesday. As you're probably aware, we're based in Worcester, and both myself and Helen has families that go back right back into the 1800s, if not earlier, for Worcester. So we are extremely passionate about our cathedral city. Anyway, on Worcester Wednesday, we usually put a post all about Worcester's past, maybe on Archdale's factory, maybe on Cadbury's factory, maybe just on Friar Street, or taking a look at one of the buildings in Worcester. However, today we're going to look at how Worcester's changed through history while celebrating Worcester Wednesday. So I have got the maps that I use when we do guided tours. As you're probably aware, we do 36 guided tours of Worcester. And when we do the tours, we like to show people how Worcester has changed. And even though we've got maps of Worcester, for example, the speed map of Worcester from 1610, what I decided to do is do my own map so the scale would be the same. Therefore, it shows Worcester changing. So, there we have Worcester. And it doesn't really look like Worcester. But if you can look at this in a bit more detail, you will notice there are some things that you may recognise. Obviously, the main one is going to be the River Severn that runs from north to south, heading down towards the Bristol Channel, which was tidal until the 1840s anyway. We've also got this here. This is actually called Frog Brook. In Frog Brook is pretty much what feeds into the Worcester to Birmingham Canal today. So if you know where the Worcester to Birmingham Canal hits the River Severn, which is here, which is Diglis, you will have an understanding of how this map relates to the ground. I will also add, down here is where Foregate Street Station is, and that's actually a low part in Worcester's geography. And if you walked from Foregate Street Station up to where now the cathedral is based, you're actually walking up a hill. And at the end of the last ice age, when the River Severn was carved out, it left huge deposits of gravel. And if you look at Worcester and you stand on Worcester's High Street, the land slopes down to the west, down to the river, and the land actually slopes down to the east to what would have been marshland. It was very marshy out here. And that area today is pretty much where City Walls Road is and where the blockhouse area is of Worcester. So that is the earliest map that we use for Worcester. And obviously there is no maps of Worcester at that period in time, so it's pretty much based on archaeology and geography plus geology of the area. But this is a whistle-stop tour. This is our next map. This is dated around about 700 to 750 BC, and as you can see, we have a small settlement forming on the high ground, which is now occupied by Worcester Cathedral. There's our little settlement, and it stayed like that for years. This is when we stopped being hunter-gatherers, which is what the other map's based on, really, about 10,000 BC, and we start farming the river meadows, and we lived there basically in quite a high point overlooking what would have been a fording point. The other interesting thing about this is later on, when Britain is occupied by the Celtic people, the Britons, we're actually part of the land of the Dubuni, which has their heartland down in Gloucestershire. This is probably the northern boundary of that Celtic tribe. But like anything in history, the Romans turn along, and by around about AD 50, the Romans are in the Midlands. We know that from the records, and they fortify the area. There was probably some form of fortification back in the Bronze and Iron Age, but it's under the Romans that a big fortification is built. We can't really say there was a fort in Worcester. We haven't found one or any major military finds, but we know it would have had a boundary, possibly a ditch, an embankment. We have found, however, archaeologically, some huge Roman earthworks in the area that is now occupied by the Cathedral Plaza or the Cathedral Square area. So we know it was sort of centred on, once again, where Worcester Cathedral is. However, saying that, where the hive is built, And also, as far as Britannia Square, there are some quite large Roman buildings. So we can say it probably started here on the site of the old settlement and then expanded from there. We also think that the earliest name for Worcester is Virtus, which could have been the name that the Romans gave it. We won't know for sure, but when you look at the actual write up about this town of Virtus, it is probably Worcester. And then eventually, as like any empire really, including the British Empire, it starts to collapse. And our next map is really early medieval Worcester. And early medieval Worcester is interesting because we've got Christianity, and there we have the startings of Worcester Cathedral, along with some other churches as well. And we have a refortification. There's Roman Worcester, and we've now got an extension on it. You will also notice with Worcester at this period in time that it's getting bigger, and we are. And it's really down to the fact there's a lot of trade coming up that river. The other interesting thing about Worcester at that time is Worcester changes names regularly. We go through a series of names: Vigornia, Wigornastra, Wycester, Wigoran, for example. We go through a series of name changes. But eventually, by the height of the Middle Ages, by the 13th and 14th century, Worcester's big. There's that much trade going on that Worcester's blossomed to the point that we've now got a cathedral and Benedictine monastery, including the Bishop's Palace, and we have a full sandstone wall going all the way around the city. There is also a castle, a motte in Bailey, built after the conquest, and that's occupying this bend of the mighty river. And things stay like that for some time. Even in the Tudor period, Worcester would have looked like that. But unfortunately, we were thrown into the English Civil War, and Worcester's fortifications change. We discussed these the other day in a video, so you can see how Worcester is upgraded to make it strong enough to withstand an attack by artillery, by cannons, by gunpowder. Sadly, after the Battle of Worcester in 1651, we are ordered to slight our defences. So unfortunately, by the 18th century, Worcester's lost its walls. But interesting, we keep the gates for some time. One of the gates in Worcester was actually used as a folly in someone's back garden for some time afterwards, but eventually it was choking the city. So what they decided to do is tear even the gates down, so we lose our defences. But by the 18th century, this country, apart from the Jacobite rebellions, is relatively safe. They also moved the old bridge. That's moved further down towards South Quay. The old bridge, when it was knocked down, which is probably Anglo-Saxon, some people say possibly even Roman in origin, took a lot to actually knock the thing down. It seemed to be a very well-built bridge, possibly using the iron slag from the Roman works. But then when we start looking into the 1800s and going into the 1900s, Worcester has no walls, so it's not being constricted to the riverbank as such. We're expanding all the time. In 1815 they opened the Worcester to Birmingham Canal, and that's really to join the mighty River Severn up with Birmingham and the Black Country. In a way, that killed trade in Worcester, purely because most things came up the river and then went straight up to Birmingham. But Worcester still held in there. We were diversifying at that point anyway, making Worcestershire sauce, producing fine bone china as we had done since 1751, so we were diversifying. Whereas originally, if you think about the Anglo-Saxon and medieval, we were purely working in wool. Anyway, by the Victorian, by the Edwardian era, that is Worcester. Obviously, I've drawn the houses in. They don't represent accurately where the houses were. They're not to scale, for example, but it just goes to show how Worcester originally had people wandering about in it around about 10,000 BC at the end of the last ice age, when we have Mesolithic hunter and gatherers coming to Worcester, and it's now quite big. And even today, Worcester is quite a large city. When you describe Worcester, you could say it's the home of Worcestershire sauce. You could even say, for example, home of Worcester bone china. However, most people now say Worcester is one of the fastest growing university cities in Britain. However, we must remember, technically, we're a fantastic medieval cathedral city. Now, during the COVID-19 lockdown, we have unfortunately not been able to do any of our guided tours. But I will add here, you can purchase from us a number of things. And we always say try and support local businesses when they're not technically working. And what I've got here is a Worcester walkabout, and we sell these anyway because sometimes we can't do a walk for someone. Maybe we have another booking elsewhere. So we produce this, and it is available in Worcester Tourist Information Centre, which unfortunately is also shut at the moment, which means you can buy these direct from us. They're £1.75 and they're a guided tour that you can do in your own time. You don't have to do the whole tour. You can actually pick and choose what you want. It starts outside the Guildhall, and it tells you a little bit about the Guildhall, and then it tells you to turn left or turn right. It then tells you to walk down this street or that street, and then eventually you will finish it and complete it. So it's actually a fully explained self-guided tour that you can do in your own time. So if you want to purchase one of them, you can either email us at discoverhistory@aol.com or comment on here or send a message on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. £1.75 and we'll post it out to you. It's a handy little overview of the city, and it allows you to explore it on your own, which is quite important at the moment. Remember social distancing. Anyway, on that note, hope you've enjoyed today's video. Happy Worcester Wednesday, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.